I am so happy to be having this conversation. As I mentioned on the opening video, one of the things that I am most excited about in this moment in journalism is that after so many years of the conversation, and particularly the story of the field being one of decline, it's so nice to be able to have a conversation that's hopeful and optimistic and about the ways in which we're rebuilding and repopulating the ecosystem. And that is in no small part due to the work of the two organizations that are represented here. I'm so happy to have with me Sarabeth Berman, the CEO of the American Journalism Project, and Robin Sparkman, who is the president and CEO of ProPublica. Thank you guys for being here. Yes. So, thinking about where we are now, I think first we got to go back a little bit, right? And so let's take a little trip in the Wayback Machine to 0709 when ProPublica launched. And tell us a little bit about sort of why ProPublica hit the scene, and particularly what void in the journalism landscape you guys were looking to fill.
Sure, happy to do it. And Kayce, thank you for hosting today,
Yes.
and thank you all for being here and for Ford's wonderful venue.
Yes.
So lovely. The people who founded ProPublica, their idea was that we wanted to use the power of investigative journalism to spur change. And the feeling was, as everyone in this room and watching at home knows, newsrooms were being eviscerated, and investigative journalism was among the first things to go because it is so labor intensive, it is so expensive to do investigative journalism. And the feeling was, let's take out all of the commercial parts of running an investigative journalism operation. Let's bring in philanthropy to support it, and let's do great, independent, unbiased, nonprofit journalism. And 15 years later, we have 6 Pulitzer Prizes under our belt. We have 5 Emmys. We have 190 people on staff. We're 40% people of color. And the work, it only continues, I think, to get better. And you can see our impact both at our national work and at our local work. We have 5 bureaus over the US with reporters and editors who are reporting on investigative stories at the local level. And then half of our staff is based in our New York headquarters. And as I said, we are very focused on impact. We track it. If you are one of our funders, we bombard you with our impact reports, where we talk in a very granular way. We connect the dots on how our story led to a particular policy change or person getting fired. So you've seen it at the national level. You've seen, for example, the Senate Judiciary Committee has opened hearings based on our SCOTUS reporting. And you've also seen it at a smaller level, where we have gotten police chiefs in small towns fired because they are incompetent. So we are all about filling a void for investigative journalism in this country, and then tracking the impact of our work at the national and local level.
Okay. So, ProPublica, you're over there doing your thing.
Mm-hmm.
And about a decade or so later, AJP enters the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, Sarabeth, what were the dynamics at play in journalism at that time, and what was American Journalism Project looking to address?
Thank you. It is really a thrill to be here. So many friends, familiar faces, funders, partners, folks that we're learning from. So really happy to be here, and also really excited to be here next to Robin Sparkman. Because I think in many ways ProPublica helped clear the path for nonprofit news in this country. But to your question, the American Journalism Project was founded to address the problem of the market failure in local news. We have watched over the last 2 decades the unraveling of the commercial local news industry. Many of you in this room are very familiar with this stat, but I think it's worth repeating. On average, we are losing 2 newspapers a week. And it is clear that the business model for a long time did not effectively cover and serve communities of color and historically marginalized communities. So for this reason, we are focused on building a new model for financing and sustaining local news in this country. We are focused on nonprofit models that can serve communities of today and communities of tomorrow. And we approach this with two focal areas. One is we're trying to expand the pie of philanthropic dollars for local news across this country. We're working with dozens and dozens of philanthropists across the country to help bring in more philanthropy to this issue. And we are investing those dollars in building out the business and revenue operations of organizations so that these organizations can be sustainable over the long term. So I think, to put it simply, we see ourselves as helping to usher in a new way to finance and sustain local news in the country.
Can I go back and tease out something you said about ProPublica sort of paving the path for nonprofit news? Can you sort of talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, philanthropy was not investing in local news, was not investing in news at all, for good reason. Local news was minting money. A lot of people made a lot of money on the news industry. And we saw over the last 2 decades that industry begin to crumble. And in our country, when we have a market failure, we have a few arrows in our quiver to address the problem. One is philanthropy, and another is public dollars. And I think ProPublica began to really make the case to funders that they needed to support this really critical mission of journalism. And I think investigative journalism was a really good entry point because of the point that you described, which is you can track so concretely impact. And of course, with local journalism, investigative journalism is part of it, accountability journalism is part of it, but it is also about weaving communities together, about uplifting stories that help reflect back to each other who we are. It's about really helping the community see each other. And so I think what ProPublica was able to do was to make the case to a lot of philanthropy that this was a space. I mean, I see it very concretely. There were funders who started with ProPublica and now say, ooh, let's do this too.
And so what would you say, I know I'm going off script, but I got questions. What would you say was the secret sauce for ProPublica then in terms of getting funders on board?
Yeah. I'm happy to take credit for all of my predecessors' work here, so this is a lot of fun. What I would say is it's a couple things. It's one, the theory of change is that in our democracy, we need an informed populace to make informed decisions. And we are able to give you unbiased, well-reported, carefully data-driven, executed journalism. And so the proof was in the pudding of the work, right? And then also, we were early on talking about democracy, and I think that we're seeing that language come forward with, the way Press Forward, for example, is framed, that in our democracy today, we need to support outstanding journalism. It is a civic good, and I think that journalism, as Sarabeth sort of said, was kind of over here. It was seen as this commercial enterprise, and now I am thrilled. I am so heartened that all of a sudden it is seen as this really important part of our civic life, that we are funding local journalism and really good national journalism in the nonprofit sector, and that our society will benefit from that work. It is thrilling, and when I went to journalism in the Pleistocene era, I never thought it would happen.
Okay, so let's bring the story forward a little bit and talk about sort of your existing work, and particularly how that work is part of the building blocks for rebuilding journalism. I'll go to you, Sarabeth, first.
Sure. First, to just put a few numbers to frame this. So the American Journalism Project was founded in 2019. To date, we've committed $46 million to 41 news organizations. And in addition to that, we've helped to mobilize about $58 million in local place-based philanthropy that's investing in market-specific initiatives. Many of the folks involved in that work are here today. And going forward, we're very focused on deploying dollars to grow nonprofit news models. We think about our work, the building blocks, as you say, in 3 ways. One is we are trying to grow organizations. 2, we're trying to build organizations. And 3, we're trying to catalyze the movement for rebuilding local news across the country. So in the growing work. We identify really outstanding organizations that are doing important work, but really need an infusion of capital and strategic support to help them build out their business and revenue operations so that they can become sustainable over the long term. And so far, this work has been going very well. To give you an example, some of you may be familiar with Outlier Media in Detroit. This is an awesome organization run by Candace Fortman and Sarah Alvarez. They wanted to serve Detroiters, and they realized that the way to get to the audience that they wanted to reach, the best way to get to them was going to be via text message. So they built out this text platform to be able to get original reporters in the hands of their community. And when we funded them, they had 2 people on staff. They now are close to a dozen. They've increased their revenue by 250%. We funded an organization in Montana called Montana Free Press. When we invested in them, they had a handful of reporters and an executive director who did everything from the bank account to raising money to, you all have seen this type of executive director. We helped them build out their business team. They've been able to grow their revenue, and that has resulted in them doubling the size of their newsroom. So we're feeling really good about this growth strategy. We're also building organizations, which means we're helping to seed and launch new news organizations. We've been approaching this in 2 ways. We have been incubating talent before their launch. So some of you may be familiar with Capital B. We got to know Lauren Williams and Akoto Oforiata in 2020 when they came to us with an idea. We gave them their first seed capital. We worked with them to help them craft their business plan to go out, raise more dollars, and then we helped make an investment in them to help them build out their revenue and operations team. We've also been working with local philanthropy to seed and launch new news organizations. Earlier this year, we helped to launch Signal Cleveland in Ohio. We worked with philanthropic and civic leaders in Ohio, did a significant amount of market research and community listening to understand what it was that Clevelanders wanted and needed from local news, and then used that to put together a coalition of funders to launch this new news organization called Signal Cleveland, which is now led by 2 really formidable leaders, Lila Mills, the editor-in-chief, and Rita McNeil-Danish, who is the CEO. And then finally, in the catalyzing a movement work, we really do think of this as a movement. This is going to take a generation of funders and civic leaders prioritizing local news. And so we've been doing a lot of work in communities to help raise awareness about the issue and raise capital. So for instance, earlier this year, some of you may have followed, and some of you in this room are very involved in the launch of the Indiana Local News Initiative, which was a coalition of media leaders in Indiana and philanthropic leaders. We raised about $10 million and are investing in both the launch of a new news organization in Indiana, also infrastructure to help support the existing local news ecosystem, and also the expansion of Capital B, which I mentioned earlier, to Gary, Indiana. So we really see the building block as helping to catalyze this emergence of nonprofit news across the country.
Can I ask a follow-up about, you mentioned the sustainability piece, and I feel like when you ask people what they mean by sustainability, you get like a ton of different answers. So for AJP, what does sustainability mean for you in terms of a nonprofit news outlet?
Sure. Put simply, sustainability means you can exist over the long term. And
but without philanthropic support?
No. With philanthropic support.
Okay.
There are a lot of industries in our country that rely on philanthropic support as a part of their funding. We believe that news organizations should be building out multiple lines of revenue, of which philanthropy should absolutely be a part of it. We also think readers can and should contribute to local news. We are seeing many news organizations do that. I see Mary Walter Brown here, who's been working hard to help news organizations increase their reader revenue. And also, there is still advertising revenue out there. There are local businesses and corporations that really do want to support local news. So this is about helping organizations build out the capacity and the practice to bring in that revenue in a sustainable way. And I think if there's any lesson from the advertising industry that fueled local news over 150 years, it is that we cannot rely too much on any one revenue stream. And so we think the mantra of sustainability is diversify, diversify, diversify. That means diversify the number of funders you have, diversify the revenue streams you have, and what that takes is investing in the operational capacity of these organizations so that they can deliver on that.
Thank you for that. So, Robin, but you have a different model, right? ProPublica is 100% philanthropic supported, right? So, can you talk a little bit about that, and then also about the work that you do that you would also consider to be building blocks?
Sure. Yes, at this moment in time, we are 100% philanthropic in terms of our revenue. It is incredibly diversified. We have more than 40,000 donors, and a lot of them give us $25 a year, and we love those people. Thank you. You know, I completely agree with you. It would make me extremely nervous to have a particular funder that we were overweight on, whether that's an individual or institution. I don't think that's healthy at all, and I completely agree with Sarabeth. In terms of, you know, what are we doing that's new in terms of our model, for the last 7 years or so, we have made huge forays into local investigative work in 2 different ways. So one is, thanks in part to a Forward Build grant, thank you all, we were able to really go deep into building out our local bureaus. So right now we have a bureau in the Pacific Northwest, in the Southwest in Phoenix, in the South in Atlanta, and the Midwest based in Chicago. We also have a joint venture with the Texas Tribune. In all of those places, we have between 3 and 10 reporters and editors. They live in those areas, and they are doing local investigative work. And that has been very successful for us. We've had 2 Pulitzer Prize nominees about 2 years ago for that work. It's just been great. We also do our local reporting network, where we've had more than 90 partners over the last 6 years. And let me tell you what that means. We work with nonprofit media outlets all over the US. We invite them to apply and suggest an investigative story that we would work on together. And there's a lot of vetting that goes on in picking that actual story. But once it's selected, we spend a year coaching that reporter. We pay that reporter's salary. The reporter stays on the staff of that publication. We work with that reporter's editor. We provide data journalism help. We have a team of data journalists. They're unparalleled. We have lawyers on staff. They do extensive FOIA records requests to help the local partner. We have visual journalists on staff. We have research reporters on staff. All of that goes in to that local reporting project, and then at the end, we co-publish it with that local news outlet. As I said, we've done 90 of those projects. We did a story in Palm Beach County about sugarcane burning that was a Pulitzer Prize nominee, because the feeling was that nobody had really reported on this before. We sent air monitors to people in West Palm Beach County, very far west, and they were able to show that actually what the EPA was saying was the okay level of carcinogen in the air was not correct with the people on the ground. It was a very important story. We did a local reporting network project with Nashville Public Radio about a judge in Rutherford County, Tennessee, who put kids in jail. That judge is no longer in office. And that story actually is about to come out on Serial in a few weeks. We did another version of the story with Serial. It was just another platform to get it out there. And we feel we're continuing to iterate on the local reporting network project. Wendy Thomas actually was one of our early local reporting network grantees for her story on a hospital that was garnishing the workers of its own hospital for medical debts, among others. And that policy changed as a result of the story. So, you know, our feeling is that all these local nonprofits in the US, they don't have the resources to do investigative journalism, and we do. And when we can work together with our resources, we can bring capacity to those organizations in a way that helps them, because we're training their staff, and they are getting a great clip that many of them are using to bring in board members, bring in funders, et cetera, to draw attention to their own work. So those are our two ways we're in local.
So I'll stick with you, Robin. I mean, both of you sort of alluded to impact earlier, but I really wanted to sort of drill down on that. So if someone comes up to you at a bar and says, Robin, it's not a great bar conversation, but let's say they come up to you at the bar, and they say—
I spend a lot of time at bars.
Right. They come up to you like, press club bar,
Right.
and say, Robin, what would you say the impact of ProPublica has been over the years? What would you say?
It would be at a yoga studio, but yes.
Yeah.
I would say that we are able to get bad people out of office. We are able to get laws changed. We are able to get policies changed. I'll give you one quick example. TurboTax. Intuit went to the federal government and basically said, you don't need to do a free form for filing your taxes. We, Intuit, will do it ourselves, okay? And what we did in our investigative reporting is we found that actually if you went all the way through the Intuit form, you actually had to pay money to file your taxes with that form. We followed that story for years, and ultimately there was a settlement on that because of our story. Our work was cited in the government's action, and people who ended up paying that money, they got a piece of that class action settlement because of our story. So we are able to get things done because of the support from our donors. We are able to make policy changes in our country.
Okay, Sarabeth, the same person saddled— oh, go ahead.
Thank you, thank you.
The same person saddles up to you with the world's most boring icebreaker. What do you say?
I say, look, we focus all of our energy on building the sustainability of organizations, but we do it for the journalism, of course. And it's been really thrilling to see really important journalism underway. So a year ago today, Signal Cleveland did not exist. I mentioned them earlier. A couple of weeks ago, the city of Cleveland started their first prosecutions against dozens of landlords who were hiding or not addressing lead pipes in their buildings that could poison children. And this was the result of their series on the issue. Several months ago, some of you may be familiar with Mississippi Today. In 2016, a group of philanthropists and journalists got together to launch Mississippi Today. Several months ago, they won a Pulitzer Prize for their investigative reporting that led to the mind-boggling revelations about the misuse of welfare funding by former NFL football star Brett Favre. Earlier this summer, VT Digger, the largest nonprofit news organization in Vermont, in fact, the largest news organization in Vermont, there were catastrophic flooding in Vermont, you may remember. This news organization turned their energy and resources to covering this story. They put out hundreds of stories. People from across Vermont were turning to VT Digger for information, for stories, for an understanding of what was unfolding. And I think a lot of people question, are people reading these nonprofit news organizations? During the week of the floods, they had 1.2 million page views. On average, they have 2.2 million page views. There are 650,000 people living in Vermont. I mean, this is reaching people. So that's what I would say in my very boring bar conversation.
Well, thank you. And I see that we are quickly running out of time. So I will just say this. Thank you, too. This has been great. Lolly and I are going to be co-facilitating a follow-up conversation where we'll tease out some of the ideas that were brought up in both A and B panels in a breakout session later this morning, and we hope we will see you there. We can keep the conversation going. Thank you, guys. Thank you.